A man wearing worn-out boots and a faded jacket quietly pushes open the glass door of one of the most expensive luxury stores in the city. The moment he steps inside, the atmosphere shifts. Employees glance at each other, already judging him by the way he looks. One worker whispers, "There's no way this guy can afford anything here." But what they don't know is that this man has been preparing for this moment for 20 years. And before he walks out of that store, something will happen that no one in that room will ever forget.
What no one inside that luxury store realizes yet is that the quiet man walking slowly across the marble floor carries more than just an old jacket and worn-out shoes. He carries a story, one built from years of sacrifice, long nights, and a promise he refused to break. To them, he looks like someone who wandered into the wrong place, but within the next few minutes, the truth about who he really is will leave the entire store stunned, and someone inside will wish they had treated him very differently.
His name was Daniel Carter. Daniel was 52 years old, and for most people in the city, he was practically invisible. For the past 2 decades, he had worked as a maintenance worker at a small public high school on the other side of town. Every morning before sunrise, while the city was still quiet, Daniel would unlock the school doors and begin his routine. Fixing broken lockers, repairing leaking pipes, sweeping the hallways before hundreds of students rushed in. It wasn't glamorous work. In fact, most students barely even noticed him. But Daniel didn't mind. He took pride in doing his job well. His clothes were always simple, old jeans, heavy work boots, and a faded brown jacket he had owned for years. His hands were rough from decades of fixing things, lifting equipment, and working long hours. To most people, Daniel looked like someone who had very little. But appearances can be incredibly misleading, because what no one could see was the discipline Daniel had practiced for 20 years. Every week, without fail, he set aside a small portion of his paycheck. Sometimes it was $50, sometimes less. He skipped vacations, rarely bought anything for himself, and whenever something extra came in, it went straight into savings. Not because he was greedy, but because Daniel had made a promise long ago, a promise he was determined to keep, no matter how long it took.
That morning, Daniel stood quietly across the street from Kingsley Jewelers, one of the most exclusive luxury stores in the entire city. The display windows sparkled under the sunlight. Inside were rows of diamond necklaces, gold bracelets, and designer watches that cost more than most people's yearly salaries. Daniel stood there for a moment, studying the display. He could see his reflection in the glass, worn boots, faded jacket, tired eyes from years of early mornings and long shifts. For a brief second, doubt crept into his mind. Maybe he really didn't belong in a place like this. But then he remembered the promise he had made 20 years ago. Daniel took a slow breath, straightened his jacket, and pushed open the glass door. A soft chime echoed through the store. Almost immediately, 2 sales associates behind the counter looked up. Their eyes scanned him from head to toe. One of them, a young woman named Brittany, leaned slightly toward her coworker and whispered under her breath, "Seriously? This guy looks like he got lost on the way to a hardware store." Daniel heard it, but he didn't react. Instead, he calmly walked toward the display case where a brilliant diamond necklace rested under bright white lights. After a moment, Brittany walked over to him. Her posture was polite, but the smile on her face felt forced, the kind of smile someone gives when they've already made up their mind about you. "Sir," she said, glancing briefly at his worn jacket, "those pieces in this case are part of our premium collection." Daniel nodded calmly. "I understand," he replied. "I'd like to take a closer look at that necklace."
Brittany followed his gaze and immediately stiffened. The necklace he was pointing at was one of the most expensive pieces in the store, a stunning diamond pendant resting on a delicate white gold chain. She hesitated. Then she let out a small, awkward laugh. "Just so you know," she said, lowering her voice slightly, "that necklace costs $38,000. The way she said it made the message clear. You probably can't afford this. But Daniel didn't step back. He didn't apologize. He simply looked at the necklace again and said quietly, "Yes, I understand." Then he met her eyes. "And I'd still like to see it." Now the tension in the room began to grow, and from the back of the store, the manager had started paying attention. Richard slowly picked up the checks and began flipping through them. At first, his expression showed mild curiosity, but within seconds, that curiosity turned into shock. Every single check was real, certified, carefully issued by the bank over many years. The amounts weren't random either. Some were for $500, some for $1,000, others even more. Piece by piece, they told a story, years of patience, discipline, and sacrifice. Richard quickly did the math in his head. Then he looked back at Daniel, his voice suddenly much more respectful. "Sir, these checks add up to over $40,000. The room had gone completely silent. Customers nearby had stopped browsing. Even Brittany was staring now, her earlier confidence completely gone. Daniel simply nodded. "I told you," he said quietly. "I've been saving for a long time." Then he looked back at the diamond necklace, his voice softening. "My daughter becomes a doctor next week, and I promised her this would be her graduation gift."
Daniel slowly gathered the checks back into the envelope and closed it carefully. For a moment, no one spoke. Brittany suddenly straightened her posture, her tone now completely different. "Oh, sir, we can prepare the necklace for you right away," she said quickly. "We can even arrange premium packaging." But Daniel gently raised his hand, stopping her. He looked at Richard first, then at Brittany. His expression wasn't angry. It was calm, disappointed. Then he said something that instantly changed the mood in the entire store. "I'm not buying it here." Both employees froze. Richard blinked in confusion. "I beg your pardon?" Daniel slipped the envelope back into his jacket. "When I walked in," he said quietly, "you didn't see a customer. You saw someone who didn't belong."
Daniel turned and began walking toward the door, the quiet sound of his boots echoing across the polished marble floor. No one tried to stop him. The employees stood frozen behind the counter, still processing what had just happened. Just as Daniel reached for the glass door, a calm voice spoke from behind him. "Sir, excuse me." Daniel paused and turned around. An older woman who had been standing near the back of the store stepped forward. She had watched the entire scene unfold without saying a word. "I couldn't help overhearing everything," she said gently, "and I'd like to apologize for what you experienced here." She handed Daniel a small business card. "I own a jewelry store 2 blocks from here. It's called Hamilton Jewelers." She smiled warmly. "And if you're still looking for the perfect gift for your daughter, it would be my honor to help you find it." For the first time that morning, Daniel smiled. "Thank you," he said sincerely. And together, they walked out of the store, leaving behind a room filled with stunned silence.
Moments like this remind us of something many people forget in everyday life. You can never truly know someone's story just by looking at them. The clothes they wear, the car they drive, or the job they have don't reveal the sacrifices they've made, the promises they've kept, or the love that motivates their choices. Daniel didn't need luxury to define his worth. What mattered was the commitment he carried for 20 years, quietly working, saving, and honoring a promise to his daughter. But the employees in that store judged him in seconds, and in doing so, they lost far more than a sale. They lost the chance to show respect, kindness, and basic human dignity. Because in the end, respect costs nothing. Yet the moment you decide someone doesn't belong, you might be turning away the very person who deserved it the most.